Hello, and welcome to Pottery with Patrick. Today I'll be showing you how to make your own personal stamps. So I have a handful of stamps here, and there's all manner of stamps that you can make. These are all made out of bisque clay, um, and they can be something very simple, like just continuations of lines, right? Just to add a little bit of a flair to whatever it is that you're working on, right? They can be something a little bit more tricky, a little bit more fun in these coils, where you can have sort of a continuation of a pattern or a design that goes through your whole piece, right? It's just a coil with the pattern carved on the edges. Or, and this is what most potters use their stamps for, is to sign their work. They can be your signature. So I really enjoy making stamps. The method I like to use is to allow a small bit of clay to get just a little bit stiff. It's not quite dry, but it is a little bit drier than it was in the bag. And then cut it down into what will be my blanks. So I'm just going to cut it. You can see it's got a little bit of resistance to it. And then I'm going to cut it again, right? And I get what I call a blank, right? Just a little bit of clay. I'll smooth the corners up just a little bit so that I don't end up with hard, round edges. And then I'm going to pat it down onto my canvas board to compress the clay here on what's going to be the carved or the stamped end. The reason for that is because as we compress clay, it gets stronger. So if we can compress the part that we're going to be using a lot, that we're going to be stamping into things, it's going to be less likely to break in the long run. So now that I have it compressed, and I've actually switched out, for those of you paying really close attention, I switched out to a larger piece of clay. I did this so that you would be able to actually see what I'm doing rather than working on a smaller bit of clay, because normally I would make a stamp this size, and you can see pretty big size discrepancy, but this is so that you can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm going to make myself another name stamp. And I use this old Celtic A variation that I really like. And that's where I'm going to start. Now, there's a couple of tools that you can use for this. As a matter of fact, you can use any number of other sculptural tools. But I have about three go-tos that I use constantly. One of them is a fettling knife. One of them is a needle tool. And the other is actually a very dull X-Acto knife. So it's an X-Acto blade that has been used until it's kind of dull, but it's still sharper than the fettling knife. You can still cut yourself with it. But that lets me get into some really sort of tight spots and cut out little hard bits of clay. So the first thing I'll do is try to figure out what kind of stamp I want. There are two basic kinds. You have ones that are like a positive stamp, where you carve away all the negative area, and then you've got a negative stamp where you carve away all the positive area. The positive stamp leaves an impression kind of like this, where the whole stamp is divoted in. The negative stamp leaves an impression kind of like this, where the signature is kind of raised on a background. So I'm going to start with the harder of the two. I'm going to start with the positive stamp. In order to do the positive stamp, the first thing I do is I'll take my needle tool and I'll do a rough layout of the stamp. So I'm copying this one more or less. I'll probably change a little squiggle. I always like changing a little squiggle in the middle. So I'll do just a rough layout using my needle tool just to sort of get it close to what I think I want. Okay? And again, I'm making this a little oversized so you all can see it easily. So if you're looking at it and you're like, wow, those are huge stamps. Yeah, they are. I don't make them this big normally, right? So I've got it started. Then I'll go in. And notice I'm not actually cutting anything away. I'm just doing the layout work, just so that I can kind of identify what I want to put where. Let's just do a diamond, right? This helps you so that if you get a little ways down the path and you're like, wait, I don't like how that worked out, no problem. You can actually change it all. So like, let's say I screwed up on this somewhere and I took the A all the way up. Oh crap, right? That's not what I meant to do. What do I do now? Well, if you find yourself in this situation where you've messed up a little bit, especially in the layout work, all you have to do is take your fettling knife, cut that little end off, give it a little bit of compression, and you're back to square one. Don't try to smooth it out. Don't try to smooth this out because you will likely get air pockets. Right. So let's just lay that back out again. I'm trying to make sure you guys can see it. All right. So now I've got the rough layout. Now I didn't do the middle just yet. You'll see why in just a minute. So now what I'll do is I will take my X-Acto and I'll go ahead and I'll start carving away what I don't need. Right? And I'll carve it from both sides so that I don't get harsh bits. Letting the clay dry just a little bit actually makes this a lot easier. If I were working with just fresh clay, it would be sticking really badly back down to itself. So having clay that is just set up just a little bit actually makes it so that when I cut into it, the clay wants to fall away rather than stick right back down to itself. All right. And I go ahead and take quite a bit away. That way I can make adjustments if I need to. But you can see how easily it pulled away, and I have the start of this guy. I'm going to do the top. You don't want it so hard that you're actually like having to put a lot of force into it. You do want it to cut away. It's kind of like a little bit softer than butter that's been in the fridge. That's about the consistency that you want. All right. If it was much harder than that, you'd risk it chipping away instead of cutting away cleanly. Right? I'm going to give it just a little tap to clean up any edges that may have popped up. Right? And we got the start of it. Right? So now, because I'm doing something really tight here, I'm going to use a tool that has a very, very tight point. I'm going to be using my needle tool. And in this case, I'm going to be making those little lines, the little squiggle lines. So I know I've got some right here. Let's look at that tool again. Yeah, okay. We're going to do this, this, and this. So like I said, I'm going to change it up a little bit, right? And these inner pockets are a little bit tedious. You want to take them slowly so that you don't make a mess of it, basically. Right. And then once I have the outer edges defined, I'm going to just go in there and pop the excess clay out. You can then take like a really small round tail end toothpick. You know, those little toothpicks that have a pointy end and then they have a round end. You can use one of those and clean up that inside if it's really bugging you. I usually just clean it up with the needle tool because it doesn't stamp that deep on the clay, so I don't worry too much about it. And then I sharpen up the edges. Now, the good thing is, you know, clay is relatively forgiving. So if you mess up a little bit, no biggie. And if you mess up a lot, you just reclaim it, no problem. Dirt's like that. All right. And so I've got that. You can see it's a little rough right there inside the edge. I'm going to use my fettling knife as a sort of like a spatula, and just sort of push those edges and sharpen up those lines a little bit. There we go. Much better. So we see we got a much more defined edge there. I'm going to take a little bit more off the top, I think. I'm going to actually use the fettling knife for this. Oh, there we go. And then do that. Here we go. And so we have a little signature stamp. So now, once this dries, I'll bisque fire it, and that's it. It'll be ready to be used as a stamp. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time. Until then, keep making.